if we were to go back to the 1960s or 1970s, knowing what we know now about what has worked on the internet and what has not worked, what different decisions would we make? How would we architect, the internet stack differently?
Hey everyone, welcome to The Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic from 4RC. Today's show explores a new paradigm for the internet called Urbit. You will quickly discover Urbit is very complementary to the world of crypto in realizing a grander vision that is Web3. Although Urbit is not a blockchain, it is a platform that enables the creation and execution of composable, permissionless, and trustless internet applications through a network of personal servers. In this episode, we interview investors Evan Fisher of Portal Ventures and Jake Brukhman of CoinFund about the basics of how Urbit aims to rebuild the internet from a clean slate, where there are tie-ins between crypto and Urbit, what use cases they're excited to see built, how Urbit accrues value, and how we can get involved as users, investors, and developers. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge podcast possible. For most of us, our crypto journey started with MetaMask, and now with MetaMask Portfolio, we can do so much more. MetaMask Portfolio puts you in control. Use the dashboard to see all your assets and balances across your wallets in one place. The buy feature allows us to buy crypto assets effortlessly with fiat options such as PayPal or credit card. The swap feature allows us to swap any tokens anytime by finding a selection of available rates. The bridge feature allows us to bridge between networks including Ethereum, L1s, and L2s based on the best price and fastest delivery time. And with the stake feature, anyone in a few clicks can stake ETH and earn rewards. Do more in Web3 your way with a safe, simple, and convenient tool that's all in one place. Track and manage your Web3 everything at metamask.io/portfolio. Whether you're a trader, farmer, analyst, or newbie, you can trade smart with KyberSwap, the OG decentralized exchange and aggregator on 13 chains. Swap at the best rates, farm with real yields, set limit orders, use their proprietary trading and AI tools with the best UX in DeFi, securely and permissionlessly. Get better rates, better opportunities, better alpha, and a better trading experience. Trade smart now at kyberswap.com. Mike, before we get back to the show, can you explain what is liquid restaking?
Everybody at this point is familiar with liquid staking. It lets you take your staked ETH, mint a liquid staking token, and then use that token in DeFi. Well, the hottest thing in staking right now is restaking. It's the ability to reuse your staked ETH to provide Ethereum's trust layer to other services that want to benefit from it. Services like data availability layers, Oracle networks, other blockchains, and beyond. The benefit of restaking is that you get to earn additional staking rewards on top of your normal staking rewards. Well, currently, if you want to restake your ETH, your only option is to lock up your ETH. The reason that's a problem is because you can't use your restaked ETH in DeFi. We are launching EETH, the EtherFi liquid restaking token, because with liquid restaking, users get the benefit of staking rewards, restaking rewards, and they get to collect loyalty points for EtherFi and EigenLayer through this token. So it's the easiest way to get exposure to two up-and-coming early protocols, and on top of that, get all the benefits of staking and restaking.
To learn more about ETH liquid staking and liquid restaking, go to ether.fi.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing Avocado. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains in USDC. And native access to Instadapp's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. Avocado, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, so let's introduce our guests today, Jake Brukhman and Evan Fisher. Evan, prior to founding Portal Ventures, was an investor at Insight Partners, the largest global venture fund. He helped invest over $600 million globally in businesses across crypto, fintech, the internet, and software. And then Jake Brukhman is the CEO and founder at CoinFund. At CoinFund, he has invested in blockchain scalability and interoperability projects, DeFi, NFT infrastructure, zero-knowledge proofs, and the intersection of Web3 and AI. So, Evan and Jake, welcome to the Edge Podcast. How are you both doing?
Doing great. Excited to be here.
Doing really well. Thank you so much for having us.
Just before we got started, I was pretty giddy with just mentioning, like, this is the most excited I've been in a while to record a podcast. And I think it's because Urbit is so complementary to the vision of Web3. I mean, in a sense, it's the missing piece of Web3 that isn't completed by the work that's been done with blockchains and crypto. And so we're just excited to kind of talk about the tie-ins. I think for folks that are normally listening to the Edge podcast who are wanting to learn about new DeFi, new Web3 projects, new AI Web3 related projects, you'll find a really natural home here in Urbit. And so we're going to try to give a very complete story to the history of it, where the state of the network is today, again, how it ties into crypto, and then hopefully how folks can get involved, whether they want to use apps in Urbit or potentially invest in the future. So guys, why don't we start with just a bit about the history of Urbit? And so I guess, like, Jake, would you be able to give us the highlights reel of what you know?
Sure, I could certainly try. Urbit was invented in the mind of a person named Curtis Yarvin, and my understanding, I'm not an expert on this history, but my understanding is that he, for about 10 years in a very academic way, I think as part of a graduate program, etc., was working on Urbit from its lowest layers, and the lowest layers of Urbit are actually basically an assembly language, which on top of which was built a programming language called Hoon, and this is a functional programming language, and then an operating system was sort of envisioned on top of this programming language, and then kind of a network of decentralized computers, which is, in a word, what Urbit is, was envisioned upon that operating system. And I think around 2014, so I want to say that's about approximately 10 years into kind of the academics of the project, this idea was formulated as a startup in Silicon Valley. It was funded by folks like Peter Thiel and E16Z and Balaji at the time. And around 2016, this is when Urbit started to actually go more into a Web3 or digital assets direction. I remember, one of the ways that I learned about the project was getting on a call with them about, a sale of digital assets that they were contemplating at that time. And that's when CoinFund actually became an investor in Urbit. And then, probably closer to 2020, 2021 or so, this is when an MVP of this new technology stack, was essentially completed and started to kind of go to market. And then there's been a bunch of growth in the ecosystem since then, which brings us to present day when, what we see at Urbit is a pretty healthy community, especially of developers, not so much mainstream or retail users quite yet, but people building up, the infrastructure of the ecosystem, something feeling very similar to, what I would call Ethereum 2015 or maybe early 2016, and we could talk much more about this, but to me, Urbit is kind of not just converging with some of the ideas of Web3, but is actually one of the purest, and most capable implementations of actual Web3 that is out physically on the market today.
I actually wasn't sure if there was any early funding rounds with Urbit, but of course, Peter Thiel and Balaji showed up there, and as they always do. And I liked hearing kind of like how you found Urbit. I would love to get Evan's kind of story. We typically ask, on the crypto pod, how'd you learn or find out about crypto? But why don't you tell us, Evan, kind of how you first came to know about Urbit?
I was working at Insight Partners at the time. It was 2020, and I was actually living in Mexico City for 3 months in a share house. It was with a good friend of mine, and then 2 of his friends who happened to be Urbit core developers. And the first night in Mexico City, we go out to dinner, and we're just having this conversation where I can't keep up. We're talking about crypto, we're talking about computers, we're talking about applications that could and should exist. And I just realized they were talking a different language. Very, very thoughtful, but talking a different language. And so immediately I went home and bought on my PA, as one does, and spent the next 2 years trying to understand what Urbit actually is. And I'd say after 2 years of concerted effort, I finally figured out what it was. About a year ago, it clicked. And I said, wow, this is as important as Ethereum if it works. Like, as blockchains do to value, Urbit does to computers and to software and to data. And so got smart on it. And then ultimately we invested at Portal into Urbit and a handful of projects across the ecosystem earlier this year. And over the summer, I decided, it should take less than 2 years to actually get smart on Urbit. So put a lot of time, probably 40 hours into writing a piece with the goal of how can someone in 15 minutes go from 0 to 1 on what this is and why it matters.
This very comprehensive write-up that Evan published. We'll put that in the show notes. This is really, I think, important reading. Even if you listen to the whole podcast, there's just so much detail in there. And actually, it's kind of a roadmap for the rest of our discussion here. So anyways, check that out in the show notes, and I think you'll enjoy it. So Evan, Jake, why don't we then talk a little bit about the state of the internet? Because I think some context here before we do talk more about Urbit as like a solution, we need to understand where are the problems, the issues, the challenges there. And so, I'd love if we could hit on actually some of the subtitles in Evan's report there about why do we need a new internet? Why are blockchains the wrong product? So anyways, if either one of you wants to kick off there with either of those.
I think Evan, maybe go for kind of a technical approach and maybe I can follow you with some more top-down stuff.
So I first learned about crypto in 2015 through more of a crypto philosophy angle. And naturally, I was a finance nerd at the time. I started my career at Goldman. I always said, how do you turn this commercial? And in my mind, there are 3 commercial reasons as to why we need a new internet. It's number 1, centralization and vendor lock-in aren't just a trust thing. It actually increases incumbent moats, which limits innovation, and that actually hurts the end consumer. The second is the lack of trust that exists in existing architectures just creates rent extraction in the form of a middleman. And that, again, is not just a trust thing or an ethos thing that costs the end consumer money. And the third is, honestly, the internet is not equipped for blockchains. And we need to upgrade the internet and internet applications for something that actually can work with blockchains and digital value.
Jake, can you add to that? How would you begin to answer the question or dumb it down for folks that are looking into Urbit but have a crypto native background?
Well, I think if you actually look into the literature and the technical designs of Urbit and sort of what has been written as motivating it to architect it the way that it has been architected, we can get into some very deep, philosophical discussions about tech and how the internet should be constructed. But I don't think we need to go into that level of depth here. I think what we could just say is, generally speaking, Urbit makes the case that the internet technology stack has grown up fairly organically, right? From technologies that probably started in the 1960s and hardened in the 1980s, and and the result of that organic sort of growth has been a number of suboptimalities about how computers work, how the internet works, how messages are delivered, what kind of guarantees protocols like TCP/IP and so on, make for messaging. These are all very deep philosophical, technical issues of the internet. But the gist is, if we were to go back to the 1960s or 1970s, knowing what we know now about what has worked on the internet and what has not worked, what different decisions would we make? How would we architect, the internet stack differently? And Urbit is basically, the creator's answer to that question. The stack would be like much simpler. It would be built on a functional programming language. It would give certain guarantees about message delivery. It would be quite a bit simpler than the actual technology stack that we have today, and so on and so forth. That's kind of the bottom-up, almost like technical view of what deep technologists in Urbit and how they would like answer that question. I would also want to offer like a top-down view, and the top-down view is very simply that Urbit came to very similar conclusions that Web3 has come to, but like 10 years ahead of Web3. And it's now becoming obvious that these things are converging because they're really, Urbit and the principles of Web3 are really talking about the same thing. And what is the core primitive of Web3? Like when we think of Web3, like what is the principal change that we're making when we're going from Web2 to Web3? I would argue that the principal change that we're making is self-sovereign data. It is the ability of individuals to essentially like run their own node or computer or physical hardware, or at least have cryptographic ownership of such a thing that houses their data. And instead of sending it to Google and sending it to Facebook, and of course, the lived nightmare that we're living through, sending it to OpenAI, this is mitigated by the fact that we can kind of own our own data, and then applications that operate on our data are more or less kind of local, and us being able to apply them to our data and like set the permissions, set the boundaries of who can see, use, and monetize our data. I would say that is the core central, sort of principle of Web3. Now, what is true of Urbit today, like we say we own data in Web3 today. We say that we own our, for example, Ethereum data, and to some extent we do. We cryptographically own keys, and we cryptographically own some data that is stored on chain. But the other realities of cryptographic ownership of data on a blockchain is that you can't store that much data. Like literally, if you were to compute the cost of storing, images and stuff like your photo library, on chain, it would be like quadrillions of dollars, like quite literally. And what's also interesting is that cryptographic ownership of such things is very different than physical ownership. Like I actually have an Urbit node from Native Planet running on my desk. Not only do I cryptographically own my data, I physically own my data. And that is an important distinction. So that's what I would say. I would say that Urbit is the kind of most pure, as I said, implementation of Web3 in this self-sovereign data sense that is out of the market today.
Guys, before we move on to talking about Urbit, you made a reference there, Jake, to AI. Anything else to share there in terms of thoughts on us making the same mistakes as what we saw on the early internet, but now with AI, or what sort of risks we face there? And I think this will help set us up further for why Urbit is actually so important.
Well, I would just say that, AI as a technology is such a technology that like once, some people start using it, and once businesses start using it and are competitive because of the fact that they're using AI kind of becomes table stakes. Like everyone needs to use it. It's the same sort of idea of like, most people in the Western world, let's say, have a mobile phone. And having a mobile phone is table stakes for operating within our society, ordering pizza, storing data, communicating, having a key to your car, etc. And it's really hard to imagine life like without a mobile phone. In the same way, where we're headed with AI it's going to be like really hard to imagine being a competitive person in a market if you don't have an AI assistant that is helping you. In Evan and my case, it's sourcing deals and doing founder due diligence and things like that. In the case of people in finance, it might be creating the best trading strategy or what have you. But AI will become table stakes for, all manner of industries. And knowing that, we know that AI is about to process incredible amounts of private data, probably more private data than Google has taken from us, than Facebook has taken from us, and so on. And this data in its current trajectory is heading to very much private proprietary companies that will undoubtedly abuse it, as we have seen from being in the internet for 30 years, right? And so there's many counter processes to that. I think, I'm a big intersection of AI and Web3 investor for the reason that I believe Web3 creates openness and primitives that protect privacy of consumers of AI. And Urbit, is an operating system and a computer network that also aims to preserve a lot of the data that people would otherwise hand over to big tech.
I would also layer onto that, like the general theme of technology is we're integrating it more into our life. Computers are becoming more personal, and AI is just the latest or most recent and most important example of this. I spend a lot of my time looking into my free time, if I have any, looking into BCI devices, for instance, or ways that we're going to intersect, brain interfaces or bio interfaces with our daily life. And that's another example of incredibly personal technology where the ideas of Web3 of, you want personalization, you want privacy, but you also want custody. That's not all of a sudden just an ethos thing. Like that's a product thing and a safety thing. I never want to have a BCI device, for instance, that is not plugged into a network that I verifiably own and can create walled gardens between. So this is just a problem that's going to become increasingly apparent across our lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just as like every company became an internet company, every company is going to become an AI company, whether they know it right now or not. And it's like, do we want to recreate the same like incumbent structure that everybody's locked into all over again? All right, we've kind of like danced around it. We've talked a bit about it, but I think we should just dive right into what Urbit is. And again, I think I'd like to use Evan's blog as a bit of a roadmap, maybe kind of hitting Urbit as an operating system, a network, and as an identity system. And if you could kick us off there, Evan, that'd be great. Just kind of walking through those kind of three main foundational pillars of Urbit.
Yeah, you nailed it. So it's those three things is what Urbit is at its core. As an operating system, in one sentence, it's an OS that lets you run a personal server. So right now we have operating systems. You can use Linux, you can use iOS, choose your operating system. But it's just the OS. It just allows you to interact with the hardware on your machine to allow you to interact with and ultimately use your machine to use applications. With Urbit, the operating system lets you launch a computer and a server that are both underneath a virtual machine. So you log into your Urbit from any hardware device. Your Urbit computer itself is actually just a VM. And what is important about it being not just a computer, but also a server, means that it's actually like putting iOS and AWS into one device for you. So that's the first key part of Urbit. The second then is it's a network. And so these VMs, these computers are only as useful as what you can do with them. And what you can do with them is a function of how can you actually communicate and talk with one another. So Urbit's a federated network, which means there are multiple levels to it with different permissions. And then what's interesting too is you can adjust the topology of the network to create novel networking systems all of a sudden. The simplest one of which would be to create a group, for instance, that everyone gets data from and pushes data to, and it's consolidated onto one node. But you can get far more complex with this. This network version of Urbit you can think of as TCP. So let the operating system be effectively Linux and or iOS plus AWS. The network now is TCP, what lets you talk to one another. And TCP is only useful if you have IP. You need to be able to identify people that you want to talk to. And that's where the identity system comes in. So every Urbit that you own is tied to a digital asset, an NFT as it is today, that represents your address in the network. And that address is used for discoverability. So in some ways you can think of it like an ENS, as an ENS is tied to your Ethereum wallet when you buy that. In some ways your Urbit address is also that. It allows you to be discoverable on the network. Those three piece together to essentially build what is this rebuilding of a full stack. And so in terms of the current internet, what Urbit's trying to consume is Linux, TCP, and IP.
I'm actually just going to ask some, I guess, I don't want to say stupid questions, but I just want to make sure, like, things I'm thinking that maybe the audience might be thinking, but Urbit needs to be connected to an internet connection, correct? And you don't need a special computer to run Urbit.
Urbit is an overlay. Urbit is an overlay network, which means you run an Urbit virtual machine as just a process on, for example, a Linux or Mac machine. And then it connects to other Urbits and creates like a network on top of the existing internet.
In some ways, logging in to your Urbit is the same as logging into your wallet on a blockchain. I can log into my wallet through many different clients. I can use MetaMask, I can use Ledger, but it all could go to the same wallet at the end of the day, as long as I have the private key. And that wallet interacts with the network of Ethereum, which is in a different way overlaid on top of other networks.
Wait, so can an Urbit also be a mobile phone? Today, I'm assuming that's coming if it's not already there, but today, are they all computers, PCs, laptops?
You could, in theory, run an Urbit on a mobile phone, but the way that you're actually much more likely to run Urbit is that you have kind of your Urbit machine hosted somewhere. That could be in a box on your desk. It could be in a cloud hosting service, of which there are now a number of Urbit cloud hosting services on the market. And what you do is you download an app in your phone and you kind of connect it to your Urbit to get whatever self-sovereign functionality. And so I like this model quite a bit because, for example, like let's say you wanted to turn your regular chat into a peer-to-peer encrypted chat where you owned all of the chat data. Well, then you just download like the chat app from Urbit and you're using it on your iOS device, just like you're using Signal or Telegram or anything else. But now you have these additional guarantees about how your data is stored. And by the way, that doesn't just apply to chat. It applies to every kind of application that you can think of because Urbit is an operating system, right? And when you're using an Urbit, like the touch point for the consumer is actually an application. And usually this is a third-party application built on top of that operating system. So now if I wanted to have Google Docs, then I would, download the Urbit version of Google Docs on my Urbit. I would download the kind of interface to that app on my iPhone. And then I could actually go and potentially move all of my actual Google Docs back into my possession, back into my data, self-sovereign data custody. And then I can access them through my desktop or through my mobile, just like I do with Google Docs today.
Jake or Evan, how difficult or easy is it to run like an Urbit device? How would you compare it to the likes of, I don't know, running a node for staking or maybe like setting up a MetaMask wallet?
Meaningfully easier than running a node for staking and about equivalent to setting up a MetaMask wallet. And the way, there are a few ways that you could do this. You could buy your own hardware from Native Planet, which is just a hardware device purposefully designed to run in Urbit. That you plug into the wall, you connect it to a local host, you follow a few instructions, you can be online in, 15 minutes. That would be the equivalent of having a hardware wallet. Like that's as sophisticated as it gets. You could also, if you wanted, host this on another platform. You could host this on your own computer. Or if you wanted the easiest approach, you could use a hosting service provider, in which case you could actually just download like Tlon or Holium on your phone And I'd guess you could be on the network in 30 seconds.
That's really cool. I'm going to have to try this after the podcast, and definitely need to add some of the links you mentioned there in terms of like where to buy that hardware if folks want to follow up on that. Jake, was there anything else that you would like to add to this definition, this working definition we've talked through for Urbit? Anything else key to know there before we start to go a little bit deeper?
Well, I would just say that I think there's actually like a number of projects that are building things that are like theoretically or like functionally equivalent to Urbit. It's a little bit of an idea maze these days, but if you look at like decentralized chat technology, right? Like if you look at Matrix, or if you look at com.app, which is one of our portfolio companies, or if you look at this project called zo.me, right? These are all projects that are basically saying something that is more or less functionally equivalent to Urbit in the following sense. They're saying, hey, you know what? Like we need to get kind of like a federated network, but a network where users can, in a self-sovereign way, store their data. And it's not just about chat. It's about expanding this functionality to all manner of applications, right? And like all of those projects that I mentioned, they do this to some extent or another. And they all have kind of a longer term view that like if we're chat today, then these federated architectures can expand to other apps in the future. And I think what that eventually, amounts to, and I'm not saying that any particular project, is going to win or is going to lose, but I think what it amounts to is a world where at some point we're going to be able to reclaim our data, right? Like we're going to find a solution, if it's Urbit or something else. We're going to go to Google and we're going to say, all right, now I'm going to download all of my data right back. I'm going to take custody of it, and then I'm going to be able to use it and own it the way that I see fit. And if you guys want to monetize it, well, unfortunately, you're going to have to include me financially in that transaction. And that is like politically, I think, the just thing for data owners to get to. And then it's going to expand to all other manner of applications where you store your data today. Also, maybe your GitHub if you're a developer, your chat if you're on Signal. Like Signal, despite being end-to-end encrypted, still stores your data on a central server, and it is like to some extent like at risk. So that's kind of how I see this sort of playing out. Like people always try to, mystify Urbit in various ways, but really Urbit is just part of a very kind of obvious macro trend of people, wanting to politically reclaim what is theirs, which is their digital lives.
Guys, one detail that caught me as I was learning more about Urbit was this idea of a local consensus, coming from like the world of crypto and blockchains. I'm not a computer scientist, but I'm at least aware that, the consensus on like a network is not easy to come to. And that's part of like the assurance that we have when a blockchain comes to that consensus. And so anyways, that's a global consensus. So I'm wondering, this local consensus in Urbit, can you explain more about like why this is important? And I guess like how does this affect the user experience?
So if you think about blockchains, they do global consensus. And why does that matter? Well, it's because blockchains were created to ultimately allow self-custodial and composable value. And to do that with value, you need to solve the double spend problem. And global consensus is the way to solve the double spend problem. If you think about the internet, though, you think about an internet application, let's use Twitter. There's no double spend problem. It doesn't matter if I lie and say I sent a tweet twice when I actually sent it once. And the reality is global consensus is a very computationally expensive product for reasons Jake mentioned earlier. It would just cost you a lot to put the internet on a blockchain. It wouldn't make sense. And so then what we come to realize is, okay, when we look at crypto, we want to create a new financial system, a la DeFi. We're trying to create a new internet, a la Web3. We want to do it for the reasons we touched on at the beginning. The reality is we're trying to put the internet on blockchains when it shouldn't live there. And we're doing that because we have a hammer and everything's a nail. And so if you look at something like Urbit, that's the first in the design space of layer one protocols that are not blockchains. They're still layer one protocols, and they're purpose built for doing everything that blockchains do to value, doing to data and to software. And they do that through local consensus, which is to say, the four of us could launch a game, or we could launch a Twitter, or we could have a group chat, and we could create a network topology, create a node effectively on the network that would create local consensus among us. And there are technical details we could get into there, but at a high level, that's what it is. That's why it matters.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Evan. And the short story is that global consensus is expensive and local consensus is cheap. And the reason why is when you're acting on a global scale, you have to coordinate like everybody globally. And when you're acting on a local scale, like for example, within the boundaries of this phone call or within the boundaries of your 30-person startup, then you have a lot of trust. If you're running a wiki for work in your 30-person startup, you really don't have to worry that much about someone, falsifying information in that wiki or creating disinformation on a wiki page or something like that. But if you're transacting with a big bank or a cold, heartless corporation, then you do want global consensus because you're willing to pay money to lower essentially the counterparty risk of that transaction. And so what's so cool about Urbit is that it allows for that whole range of models. And the reason why is because an Urbit is a computer. An Urbit can connect to a centralized or federated set of counterparties, but it could also connect to a blockchain with a high degree of global consensus. And so this ability to coordinate all, the really high consensus things, the really low consensus things, and everything in between is a superpower of Urbit, by virtue of being this general kind of application environment.
I want to dive like another layer deeper and maybe flip this one to Evan. Evan, maybe you can kind of walk through your Urbit as a city analogy. I feel like that kind of paints a good picture of like kind of the different neighborhoods or ecosystems within Urbit.
This Urbit as a city analogy is used to describe the purpose at a high level, admittedly, but the purpose of different levels in the federated address space system that is Urbit. Urbit's known for having funky nomenclature. So the three are called planets, stars, and galaxies. We won't go into the detail around all of the other constellation systems that exist, but let's focus on those three. The way I think about it is let Urbit be a city. And to get into that city, you need to be a resident. Similarly, to log on to Urbit, you need a planet. You need a computer that lets you get onto this network. Now, with that said, if you want to run a business in that city, you need to have office space. You need to have a storefront. And then lastly, that storefront needs to live in a neighborhood. And you would choose the neighborhood that your storefront lives in based off what your store is, which is to say, if I was launching a fashion brand, for instance, I'd probably get a storefront in Soho. And I'd get it in Soho partially for this reason, because of the network effects that exists there. But it's also possible that maybe I'm building a different type of business and I want to be in Hudson Yards or a different neighborhood because of infrastructure that exists there or tax reasons that exist there. And so if we run with that analogy, you have planets as the resident card to get into the city. You have stars as having some permissions that are valuable in launching businesses on Urbit and ultimately coordinating trust on Urbit. And then you have galaxies, which serve as the root from which you can push more interesting types of software down, which all apply to everything that lives underneath your address space. So to be clear, every planet needs to live under a star, and every star needs to live under a galaxy. And with that analogy, you start to see why you'd want to own different pieces of the stack, depending on what you're doing on it. But you also see why it becomes valuable over time. With address space, there's scarcity. It's not scarce in the sense of, it's going to run out tomorrow, but it's scarce in the sense of there's civil resistance, and scarce in the sense of eventually there's going to not be enough land for every business to operate, and that's going to come with some value. And as it's valuable to have land in New York City, it will be valuable over time to have land in Urbit because of the business you can do, because of the culture you can be a part of, et cetera, et cetera.
And just to follow up to that, so are you basically saying that areas within Urbit that have maybe more economic activity or more people congregating make that kind of virtual real estate almost more valuable?
As it currently stands, most do not have that pricing dynamic. Into the future, I would expect that to be the case. I would expect there to be certain pieces of Urbit geography that are more valuable because of business that happens there, because of maybe culture and content that happens there. It's also possible it's more valuable because of software that's pushed down from the top down. So maybe there's actually walls in the software across the Urbit network. And lastly, it could be more valuable if it's just reliable. Like, certain cities are more reliable on their infrastructure than other cities. So those are a few examples of what will drive a difference in value across the real estate over time.
Any cities within Urbit then that you'd recommend as being more culturally significant or having more promise already in terms of that economic activity? Like, if I'm new, I don't want to go to some desolate galaxy or planet or star. Like, I want to go somewhere that, other people are building and using applications and businesses. So anyways, what's just a few that you might recommend checking out?
Well, I would actually say that what's a cultural norm in the community is this idea that we shouldn't tell you that. We should invite you to join Urbit and kind of explore and find the thing that most is resonant with you. And in fact, there are a lot of communities, and there's also communities that sort of index other communities where you can look up, what's interesting. One of the most interesting things about Urbit is, for how technical of a project it is, it's also an incredibly cultural community. Like Evan and I were just at Urban Assembly in Lisbon last week, and it wasn't just about technology. It was also a little bit about art. So it was a little bit about culture. There were events to that effect. And so, we as investors have been in crypto long enough to know that, one of the key success factors in any given ecosystem is its community. And there's many different sub-communities in Urbit where you can find sort of, whatever you're interested in. So I don't know, Evan, isn't there a startup that's indexing stuff?
There is. I can maybe give two communities that are more vocal. It feels wrong to give away a lot of the communities that are less vocal, because I think what makes them special is people discover them. Two of them are more vocal. One was recently created by a company I'm invested in called Vaporware. And what they did is they launched a platform called Milady OS, the Milady operating system, whereby we won't go into the technicals, but effectively you can upload the metadata of your Milady to an Urbit chip. It's completely abstracted. And then you get access to different pieces of software. That could be group chats today. Over time, that could be games, other things, as a function of the attributes you put onto your Milady. And so effectively you can re-attribute your Milady with special edition packs that only exist as a result of putting it on your Urbit OS. And now there are technical reasons as to why that would be, but that's one community, for instance, the Milady community on Urbit. Another, which is increasingly vocal, is something called Blimp DAO. It's a community focused exclusively on the importance of bringing blimp air travel back. It's mimetically dense, fascinating, and frankly, a great case in point of what is special about Urbit culture. You would not find this anywhere else in the world.
These are amazing.
That is so interesting.
We don't want to contribute too much to the gentrification of Urbit by giving away all its secrets, but these are phenomenal. I don't know why, but I'm not surprised there's some Milady crossover with Urbit. It all makes perfect sense. Fascinating.
I would say it's interesting because you mentioned at the beginning kind of the mystique of Urbit. There are a lot of crossovers in the background, which often don't get a lot of daylight, but there's a lot happening in the shadows of Urbit.
Guys, I know that you can buy, is it planets on OpenSea? I think with some more of the detail that you've shared here, one concern that I would have for, the special nature of the Urbit community, just like the fact that it is a community that seems to thrive for similar reasons that we've seen within like the likes of Ethereum and Bitcoin and Solana and other like sub communities of crypto. I think my concern here is like, what happens if in the crypto bull run, as Urbit is getting lots of attention now and starting to get some crossover traffic from crypto natives, like, is there a risk of folks over speculating on and buying up like some of these digitally scarce assets like planets, and then that disrupting the actual utility of those? Like, in other words, is there anything within Urbit that like says like if you buy something and you never use it, like that it can be like recalled or something? Or, in other words, I'm trying to prevent like the types of things we've seen with ENS. There's a lot of like ENSs that just got bought up and are hoarded. And as a result, like, I don't know, some folks can't get the ENS domain that they want. So anyways, any thoughts on that you can share?
To answer your question about, is there like a recall or a rug pull function on Urbit assets? To the best of my knowledge, there is not. I think Urbit assets are generally NFTs. They're pretty self-sovereign, and they give you the right to boot an Urbit computer on that network. So as long as that network exists, that should be a utility-backed kind of asset. The other things that Urbit community has argued over the years is that as an operating system, as something that could be potentially usable and useful to billions of people, there's actually like something like 4 billion possible kind of like Urbit planets, or in other words, like computers that you could boot. This is actually like a really big opportunity at scale. Like, if Urbit is adopted in the same sense that Linux is adopted, then unlike Linux, Urbit is going to have this monetization and value accrual opportunity using this self-sovereign tokenized NFT like address space. Now, that being said, Evan and I as investors are also keenly aware there are problems with the Urbit kind of address space as it stands today. Like, for example, one problem is, unlike a Bitcoin or an Ether or other scarce assets that we've seen in crypto that have low circulating supply, Urbit supply is pretty abundant. And for it to start to accumulate value like that, you really need scale, and you really need adoption at scale. And this has actually been a disadvantage and a problem of the way that Urbit's digital assets have come to market. And there's lower liquidity in those assets because they're NFTs. So there's a lot of discussion in the community these days of like, how might you mitigate that state of affairs? Like, can you fractionalize, the land assets? Can you, hire market makers? Can you imagine other token models that are possible in Urbit, et cetera, et cetera? So I think, there's always a chance to over speculate in a bull run. Urbit has not really enjoyed that previously. I'd love it if they would enjoy a kind of capital infusion in this coming bull run, but we'll see what happens.
And I think the meta point is Urbit is a network, and like all networks, incentives end up being created over time to push the network into the direction that improves the product. Ethereum's tokenomics evolve, Solana's tokenomics will evolve. Most networks have evolving tokenomics, and the idea of Urbit, I think, is how do you over time potentially change the tokenomics in a way where you're driving value to assets, because that actually helps the network. Like, you want assets to be valuable for various reasons that you could go into in a longer form. So the short answer is it's evolving in a direction that will help drive growth of the network and ultimately reward early investors, not financial advice.
Just to remind folks, there is no Urbit token, right? And I guess, would there potentially be one in the future? I kind of want to dive just for a few minutes into like any other intersections you see between Urbit and crypto. I think the one that we called out so far is planets as NFTs. The fact that those are, and by the way, correct me if I've got any of this detail wrong, but I thought those planets are represented as NFTs on Ethereum mainnet. But anyways, yeah, any other intersections there to kind of call out, including like, could there or would there ever be an Urbit token? Does it ever make sense, even though we've kind of talked about why a blockchain is not necessary for a lot of the value here in Urbit?
So each level of the address space is an NFT. Each planet is an NFT, each star is an NFT, each galaxy is an NFT. Think of the NFT as your virtual key to log into your virtual machine. And so you need to own it to log it. Now, correct that there's no Urbit token today outside of those assets. Into the future, it certainly could make sense. And I think the comparison that then comes up is, how do you think about when you own Solana, for instance, what are you actually owning? You're owning an asset that you're using to speculate on the protocol's value into the future. You own it because you believe that Solana will be valuable, and you could argue, why will it be valuable? Will it be valuable because it goes in the direction of capturing value, a la ETH post 1559? So there should be an evolution, or can be an evolution, in tokenomics. You own something like Solana because you want to speculate on the future value that Solana could have. And it's possible that evolves in the direction of Ethereum, where with 1559, it became a productive asset. It's possible it turns into a money. It's possible it turns into something totally different. Similarly, Urbit, you can own Urbit as a mechanism of ultimately speculating on the value that the Urbit network will have in the future. And as we said before, the tokenomics and the incentives of it will naturally evolve with time, as it does for all networks. But that's another comparison and another similarity, similar to other layer ones across crypto, because although Urbit is not a layer one blockchain, it is a layer one with equivalent potential to layer one blockchains.
Well, I would just say it's really interesting. So a few things to say. When we think about Ethereum and why Ethereum is a valuable token, and why is it that people kind of equate ownership of Ethereum with betting on the future of the Ethereum network. Well, we actually have a fundamental cash flow model underneath Ethereum, which is that, people pay gas, and that creates a revenue stream for validators of the network. And there's certain revenue and a certain, kind of like fundamental model that operates there. At the same time, if you tried to value Ether exclusively on this model, you would find that it has an extremely high multiple, right, to the actual business that's being done. And one way to explain that is that it is some portion of Ether's price is explained by the fundamentals, and some portion of Ether's price is explained by the social consensus that Ether is the token of Ethereum. Now, for Urbit to have a token, it's an interesting state of affairs, because Urbit, by and large, today is a decentralized network. There's no like single kind of point of development of Urbit necessarily. I mean, there's a foundation, there's the original developer, Solana Incorporated, but if you look at like the distribution of assets and how governance works, it's actually a decentralized network. Moreover, there's many stakeholders inside of Urbit who are founders, who are investors, who are spectators, who own address space. And for a token to take place, all those distinct decentralized parties would have to come to a social consensus that there's a token and a token model that makes sense for Urbit. Now, all I'll say though is that, looking at Urbit sort of in an analytic way as an investor, probably one of the biggest kind of bottlenecks in Urbit today is just the availability of capital for its core development teams and for its core and for the founders that are operating in the ecosystem. Urbit is a little bit of a newer network in the consciousness of investors. I think the teams are a little bit more nascent, a little bit younger, a little bit less experienced. And so it's harder to get institutional capital for those teams. Although Evan and I are seeing a lot more institutional investors like being interested in the ecosystem, looking around. And at the same time, Urbit never did go. Remember, it was kind of converging with Web3, but it wasn't like a Web3 project originally. And so, unlike Ethereum, unlike Solana, unlike Bitcoin, it didn't have this fungible digital asset to start. And so, you could argue that there's some interesting opportunities that would be available in the form of cryptonative capitalization for the Urbit ecosystem if a token were to come into being. But of course, that's a highly decentralized process. And how would it work? How would you tie the address space of Urbit to this new coin? Would you dilute existing holders? Would you make it a one-to-one? There's all these like models that are possible that would need to be worked through.
Guys, you've mentioned the fact that you are investors in Urbit. So when you say that, I just want to clarify really quickly. Are CoinFund and Portal Ventures, are you invested like in the Urbit Foundation? Are you saying like the apps and the Urbit ecosystem? Do you all buy up planets, stars, galaxies? Any detail there you can share?
CoinFund is a Galaxy holder in the Urbit network since 2018.
Yeah, and Portal is an investor via Galaxies in Urbit and also in a handful of companies across the ecosystem.
Really interesting. Didn't realize too, Jake, you go back to 2018. Wow.
We actually started investing in 2016 when they first had their first digital asset sale of stars, but we became a Galaxy owner when Galaxies were offered in 2018.
Well, I was an account sales executive in 2016, so there's that. There's still that. Yeah. Guys, can we move into? Now you're wondering, you're like, why did I do this interview with this former account sales executive? Can we move into the app ecosystem? I'd love to just talk through like what are some of the more popular apps today on Urbit, and then also what would the two of you like to see built on Urbit in the near future?
There's a broad array of apps. I'll give you the non-answer, then I'll give you the answer. The non-answer is what makes Urbit special is how easy it is to build applications, how easy it is to build small communities. And the result in that is a lot of small networks that form. And that's kind of the purpose of Urbit, as we were talking about with the groups that you can get a part of. In Urbit, we call this small apps, which is to say there are a lot of apps that you could just build pretty quickly once you understand the developer environment. Like it could be a day, it could be a weekend. Some of the more popular apps, there's something called Rumors, which is what the name is described as. There is an app that recently came out called Alphabet, which is a betting market on Urbit. You have MiladyOS, which is an app on Urbit. You have something called Studio, which is developed by Terrell, which lets you easily push content and monetize content via Urbit. There are things like radio. There are things all the way ranging from that to numerology apps and apps exploring the occult to apps exploring esoteric computing architecture. So it's really a wide array of things that exist. I think the best place to start is joining a few groups, joining Rumors, exploring some of the explore tabs, be it in Tlan or in Holium, and then finding and making your own Urbit, because that's what makes it so special.
That's really good coverage of sort of the diversity of things. I think there's probably about 100 or so apps, at least that I know of. Evan, correct me if there's been like a deluge more recently, but like some of my favorite apps are the ones that give you kind of like the Web 2 centralized big tech functionality, but on your self-sovereign data. So there's for example, a version of spreadsheets that you can run locally in your Urbit and only on your data. And it feels like so good knowing that, some big tech company isn't scanning this, isn't like trading an AI model with this? Isn't selling it to third parties? Is it like front running, your trading because that's what you have in your spreadsheet, like things like that. And I think also the reality is that it's still very early. We have some. We were actually measuring this at CoinFund. There's something like 100 monthly active developers at Urbit today, and that's actually pretty good. If you list all of the ecosystems that most people know, the median monthly active devs will be around like 60 to 80 or something, and Urbit is like closer to 100 and growing. And so it's actually kind of in the top or the more higher percentiles of developer activity. But those like great apps are, the best apps of Urbit are still yet to be built. I mean, there's a lot of, professionalization that will need to take place and user experience and so forth. And of course, we're still most of the adoption from like mainstream users, even though that's becoming a lot easier to do. But when I think about Urbit and its apps, I think about like what are going to be the really useful things that mainstream or retail customers are really going to want to try. And it's going to be like self-sovereign productivity software, spreadsheets, Google Docs, host your own blog, in a self-sovereign way, collaborate, but within small groups, potentially with financialization once blockchains get more integrated into Urbit, things like that. I see Urbit as a platform where, you could actually run a productive DAO, for example, because like to me, the problem of running a DAO is it's not just one application. It's like 17 different modalities of communication. It's a chat, it's a document, it's a spreadsheet, it's a sentiment analysis software, it's a voting software, it's a video chat for when you have to like meet with the other members. It's like all of these things. And of course, each one of those things is an app on some operating system. Urbit brings all those experiences together in a single computer that you own. And that's one of the strongest sort of like value propositions from a consumer perspective of Urbit, at least for me.
Yeah, that DAO coordination point is huge and definitely resonates. Like most DAOs operate through Discord right now. And like, the joke's always like, oh, Discord is down, so our DAO ceases to function. And there's definitely sensitive material that's, I think, somewhat frivolously passed through some of these DAOs just over Discord. So yeah, that's definitely a very interesting use case for an app that I'd love to see.
And of course, DAOs have to buy like 12 different Web2 SaaSes and pay them, once a month with a credit card in order to function, right? And again, this would fix that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, guys, we just have a few more questions here. Thanks for sticking with us. We've gone a little bit over, but yeah, switching gears here a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question. My dad always asked me about Bitcoin. He was always telling me like, well, they're just going to shut it down. So I guess my question is like, how anti-fragile is the Urbit system? Is there any attack vectors, or is there a way to kind of shut it down?
I'm unaware of a way that you could shut down the Urbit network. Now, let's say there was a galaxy or a star that I was operating underneath. They could shut down, is the reality. And they could not be a reliable host. The key difference, though, being all of the data that I need lives on my Urbit chip still. So it still lives on that planet that's nested under a star, that's nested under a galaxy. So the galaxy could shut down. I still own the computer, and I can take that computer and say, actually, I have a right to exit. I have freedom to exit. I exit, I put it under another. So I'm unaware of a way that you can shut everything down. And this ties again into the inevitable evolving mechanisms of the network where you'd want to disincentivize something like that. And there are many economic models you could explore to do that. But the long and short is no, you couldn't shut down the network.
I want to just ask you one more thing. Just, you were both at Urbit Assembly, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. I actually started to see quite a bit of chatter on my Twitter about Urbit Assembly, and some of the stuff that caught my eye was the intersection of AI and Urbit. I was wondering, maybe Jake, if you can kind of speak to some of that, because that's starting to look pretty interesting and compelling to me just from spillover that I saw in my Twitter feed of some of the talks.
Yeah, I mean, it's really at the core of our AI and Web3 intersection thesis at CoinFund, which is that, basically what you want to do is you want to establish stores of self-sovereign data so that you can control, which AIs, or which AI products, or which AI companies have access to it. I could see that where things are rapidly heading is to agents and AI assistants, right? These are AIs where you're going to feed, like, for example, your entire email inbox into them, or the entire set of personal writings that you have, or the entire set of proprietary research that you have been doing. And the way that data tends to get into a form that LLMs can process, usually something called vector embeddings, right? There's a bunch of vector embedding databases that are out of the market, like Pinecone, et cetera. And all of those solutions and all the solutions from OpenAI today are centralized, which means that to get the value proposition, you're being asked to literally take all of your data and literally give it to a corporation. And so I think, the broad view on Urbit is here's the technology that allows you to not do that. Here's technology where you can store data in a self-sovereign way. You can probably integrate it with, at CoinFund, we're funding sort of decentralized vector embedding databases and things like that. And then you control what LLM has access to that. And maybe that's a locally running LLM that, again, is in your custody. And that's something that whole process could be something that happens on your Urbit in a fully integrated way with a nice user experience and these strong guarantees that you're protecting your data.
So interesting. Well, guys, this is a great place for us to, I think, close out the podcast. So I just want to remind listeners first that they should learn more about Urbit by going to urbit.org. They can also then follow up by following the two of you on Twitter, which Evan's at Evan B. Fish on Twitter, and check out Portal Ventures at portal.vc. Jake is at jbrook on Twitter, and you can learn about CoinFund at coinfund.io. And then, guys, just wanted to say the obvious. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise on Urbit. I would love to close out with anything else you'd like to share, namely any recommendations for those that are interested to follow up on, using, developing, or investing in Urbit.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. And, we've done a bunch of content related to Urbit, especially my tweets as it relates to some of these issues we've discussed. But more recently, we had a Twitter Spaces at CoinFund with, some of the core engineers and developers of Urbit to really go deep into, the technical issues there, the reasons why. So check that out on our CoinFund Twitter.
And thanks again for having us and sharing what I think is a very undercovered project, but that will change over the next couple of years, I imagine. The best resource on our end is the blog post that you mentioned. Put a lot of time and effort into that, and hopefully it helps people get up to speed in meaningfully less than 2 years.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.